Alrighty, we are finally back with episode 22 of the Break Even Brothers podcast. Brad, how has it been? Tell us why we were gone for so long and give us some updates.
Yeah, I was on my honeymoon, which I got married last year. Didn't plan the honeymoon until recently, the past few months, but I went to Japan and Korea. I did Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka area. Korea, went to Seoul. It was a ton of fun. I had told Ben we could potentially pre-record things or we could just wait. And, as we're such an excellent podcast, of course we do things live for the audience. So I've been gone for about 2.5 weeks now. And man, has it been crazy in those 2.5 weeks. So much stuff has popped up. And when I was on vacation, just trying to get on Twitter to read things, but honestly, the internet wasn't that good. So I've been catching up now back in, my hometown. But it was great. It was a lot of fun, a lot of great food, good experiences. My first travel that I was completely unplugged, so I didn't bring a laptop, was just my phone and my iPad. And if you know me, I love coding in my free time, and a little bit of a different vacation vibe, but nonetheless extremely relaxing and fulfilling, and feeling very energized to get back to it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. It was, I couldn't help but text you a couple times with some cool, you missed a lot, or you were gone for a lot of announcements as it is, these days. But a couple times I texted Brad, be like, oh, you got to check this out. You got to check this out. And good enough on his part. He didn't respond right away. He was out doing stuff. So, but I couldn't help myself. I was like, oh, check this out. So yeah, it's great. You had a good trip.
Yeah,
and yeah.
I think Ben sent me one business idea and I was like, this sounds good, but I'm like deep in doing exploration of like various areas in Tokyo or something. I told him, hey, I'll take a look at this once I'm back. And I probably still need to take a look at it, but I think the energy and the excitement of the releases is huge. And we're going to talk about that later today. But yeah, that's the beauty of AI, is you can go take a break for 2 weeks and come back and your life is easier in measurable ways. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, should we hit our welcome piece here and kind of our intro game that we're going to play?
Yeah, so I found this online. Essentially, it's a propaganda I'm not falling for. And the premise of this bit is essentially finding popular trends and describing why you might not be on board of this trend or this popular thing you saw. It could be for any reason. It could be, an item, a phrase, an idea. It's something that maybe others agree with and you don't. And this is kind of the way to highlight that. So I can jump in first, which, as I was making my list before the podcast, I thought this one would be interesting because I've heard Ben talk about it. So I'll just, hit the ground running. And one of the propaganda I'm not falling for is LangChain. I'll pause. Okay. Ben looked. The reason I say that, and I'll give context, of course, is because LangChain came out a long time ago. It was very early in the frameworks of AI tooling, and I applaud their effort. But to me, as an engineer, I feel like more layers of things sometimes complicates things. Yes, it's easy to use, but as a kind of like power user / engineer, I want to have control of a lot of these things. And when I use things like LangChain, and yes, I haven't used it in a while, so maybe it's different. But back then, it was very much like layers and layers of prompt beautification. I didn't know what was going on. I think that is propaganda I'm not falling for. I don't want to use it. I think it's good for some use cases, but for me, I'm out.
Yeah, sure. Hey, I get that. Yeah. Should I give my opinion on it, or you go with the next ones first?
Well, let's go with the next ones.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, no, you go now. You go now.
Oh, okay. I'll do mine. Okay. Propaganda I'm not falling for is, I've seen this a lot on X and even on LinkedIn. And it is, I'm going to call it agent overload. And what I mean by that is every single software like app that's out there right now is announcing that they're releasing agents. So QuickBooks just did one. Workday they announced it a couple of months ago, I think in February. And to me, I think those are cool features, but I feel like that kind of misses the point on agents. I feel like agents are best when they kind of sit almost outside of a system and they can kind of interact with different systems. I think having some functions and usefulness within that system is good, but I think there's a lot of hype around that, I guess is my point. I think it's a nice feature, but like, I think, having a big keynote about, how QuickBooks can auto categorize a transaction, like it could have kind of already done that. Like it wasn't that far away from doing that. It's not as big of a lift as I think the headline is trying to convey. So and I think at some point that's going to become too much. Like if you have an enterprise, you have a business, and every single business has its own quote unquote agent, which I think is kind of a fluffy definition oftentimes, then I can see that being a bit too much to manage and not that useful, or not as useful as it's being hyped up to be.
I like that. I think these companies are really getting on the AI bandwagons, that anything they can shove in that direction feels good for the stock and kind of the status of the company. So if you're a PM listening to this and you're working on an agent feature, just double check, make sure it's the right fit for your company and your product. But I like it. Okay.
Keep going.
Go ahead.
I'm going to grab something really fast. Keep going.
Okay.
Just to that point, I'm going to grab something. Hang on.
Okay. So the second one, that propaganda I'm not falling for me, is Grok. And I think it's definitely a little bit of a change of point of view. So I talked about Grok a while ago on the podcast, and essentially they're an inference provider that is much faster. So they run on their own custom chips, and they mostly serve the open source models. So we're talking Llama, DeepSeek, those sorts of models. And the sad reality is that a lot of these models aren't as good as these leading Claude, OpenAI models. And these are obviously private models, closed source. And I used to be on the bandwagon that, when open source is nearly as good as closed source, using Grok was really good because you got fast speeds, cheap, and it wasn't through, this official provider like OpenAI or Claude. Now I've changed my mind. I think it's out. I think using the best intelligence is by far the way to power the best experiences for your users, for your apps, for your automations, for your agents. If you're not paying for the bleeding edge intelligence, I think it's really not worth it to pay for Grok. And again, this is something that I changed my point of view on. Before I was like, hey, when they're close, Grok is beautiful. When there's a gap there, I ditch it immediately. And I think that goes to the trend of AI tools evolving rapidly. And I'm trying to use the best and latest and greatest, no matter how much friction that takes me. And again, if Grok is behind or open source models are behind, I'm immediately ditching those and going to something that I would pay top dollar for to get that better intelligence. So for me, Grok is out right now.
Interesting. Cool. Okay, the one thing I wanted to grab really quick is from the book, AI Engineering. But what you said was companies are pushing out AI a bunch right now. It helps the stock and all that. And so in the book, they quote, or I'm going to quote from the book, according to Wall Street Zen, companies that mentioned AI in their earnings calls saw their stock price increase more than those that didn't, an average of 4.6 increase compared to 2.4. So it does pay to hype a little bit. So, yeah, it does, so you can see, and obviously like there is a ton of benefit. You and I have this whole podcast basically about this topic, about AI and its usefulness and all that kind of stuff. But there is also a hype machine that kind of consumes companies a bit. So yeah. Cool. Okay. My other propaganda I'm not buying is Perplexity AI. Tried it while you're out on the honeymoon. Didn't think it was anything special. In fact, I kind of hated it. Some of that was a learning curve, I'm sure, but or not a learning curve, but just kind of unfamiliarity, I guess. I'm so used to Gemini and Chat GPT by now that Perplexity just felt like a cheap knockoff. Sorry. And I did the pro. I kind of trialed the pro plan. But yeah, I mean, and they're doing a ton of marketing out there. I think I don't know if that's to get market share or the fact they're losing customers. I don't know. And I saw actually some negative feedback that was actually after I had signed up and kind of tried it out for a little bit, but about how they added a bunch of like widgets when you open the app to where now it looks like a MSN.com homepage or like a Yahoo.com homepage where it has like all these like weird articles and stuff like that like no one asked for.
Yeah.
And I think they've actually taken that off since because they had such negative reception to it. So yeah, Perplexity, we ranked it, I think, 1 or 2 episodes ago in that kind of stack ranking. And at that time I said I hadn't used it. And having used it, I'm still kind of out on it. Not my thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I know people that use it. I personally don't find it that attractive. I use OpenAI's O3 model with web research. And I found that just takes Perplexity's cake and it's not even a competition. Again, I'm not really a power user of it. I also experienced a little bit of it and did love it. So I'm not the perfect judge, but in my short stint with it, I also felt like a lot of people used it. I tried it. I didn't like it. I moved on. I'm with you. I think it's out. I would definitely agree. Cool. My final one for today would be kind of AI agents in the terminal. So I use this fantastic terminal on Mac called Warp. I love it. I've been using it for, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years now. They've been trying to add this AI agent into the terminal. So as I type in commands, like if I'm changing directories or doing whatever I need to do in the terminal as a developer, oftentimes if you write a long command, they have this UI that essentially acts as an agent where you could type in plain text like move this file to this directory or like rename all these files to change the file extension. Like you could literally type it in as if it was ChatGPT. They analyze that and they run the command. Kind of cool off first glance, but now that I have these tools like ChatGPT, Claude Code, which is a CLI that does things for me, it's very much more packaged into a way that I think is more effective. And if you know me, I'm trying to try all the AI tools, but each one costs me at least $20 a month and I can't go on forever. So I've encountered the UI pop-up on Warp and I think it's a bust. I think a good premise a few months ago. Now the tools are getting better. OpenAI has Codex, which is another CLI that you can run the CLI, ask it to do things, and it'll do it. Claude Code and another excellent CLI. You run the CLI, ask it to do things. And to me, I want to keep Warp inside just a terminal only, not have an AI agent, and let these more sophisticated toolings do that job. So I think it was a great idea. I think they've tried their best. No flack to the team, but to me, it's out because I think there's stronger tools to get the job done in that exact same category.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I could see at some point you're just like, I don't want an AI doing this. I just want to do it. Like, just let me just type in my terminal commands, please.
That's a few times it's been like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate the help, but I'm not interested. Yeah. Cool. I remember you pushing Warp on me a long time ago. You're like, you have to download this, got to download that. Yeah. Cool. My last one is a bit of a riff on MCP. So we talked a lot about MCP, I think, maybe 6 or so episodes ago, maybe 5. And super cool. It has a huge role to play, I think, still to come. But I've seen a lot of, again, LinkedIn, a lot of X being like, you can turn your API into an MCP in 2 seconds if you just run this code, or if you just give it to, Claude or Cursor to change. And it never, like, it's always a very simple use case. They don't ever kind of demonstrate it with a meaningful, like, API, like doing actual useful things. It's always like some basic, oh, I have a function that does multiply. I have a function that gets the weather. No one cares about that.
Yeah.
And so, like, having worked with MCPs, I'd say pretty in depth, like now, like for my level and for kind of what I'm interested in, they're not that straightforward. Like there's a lot that goes into them. There's like security, and kind of how you handle OAuth if you're doing it at a business or at your company. There's like safety that you need to consider. So like just saying that you can take an existing API and just morph it into an MCP, I'm not buying it. If it really is that easy, I must be missing something, because I think there's a lot more nuance to building a functional, production-ready MCP than just taking your API and telling Cursor to make it an MCP. There's no shot. I mean, half the time I even tell Gemini or Cursor, or or I guess, well, Cursor, is obviously using one of the models, but anytime I tell any LLM, can you build something related to MCP? They'll come up with like, oh yeah, you need Minecraft context protocol. I'm like, no, like it still doesn't know like MCP that well. Like I would be curious if you asked it today. If you ask ChatGPT what's MCP, I don't know if it'd give you the right answer. Just your kind of standard chat. So like it's still so new, and a lot of these models are indexed on stuff that was more than a year ago, where I don't think it has that much source material on MCP, and so it's just not that simple to build right now.
Yeah, I agree. I've been building quite a few MCP servers in the past like 2 days, which I'll touch on later. But I've also felt the same. I think I posted on Twitter about building an MCP for Laravel, and I think I had one comment that was like, "This is easy, like super straightforward." And I thought, this guy's never done it. That's a clear understanding that he's never done it. Which once you start building it, interacting with it, it's not as straightforward as you would think. And I think there's a whole larger discussion around that.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. Well, that was an awesome little bit. I think there's tons of propaganda that I'm trying to not fall for, and that's a constant battle of not being sucked in. I do want to be sucked into the good ones, but to miss the bad ones or the ones I don't want to waste my time on, it takes a little bit of skill. So hopefully we're on the right kind of ballpark for that. But to roll into our next segment, there's been a lot of updates in the past 3 weeks, and I do want to do a deep dive on our main topic, Claude Code, later, so stay tuned for that. But today, I just want to go through all the releases from all the top tier companies and kind of get your input, get your thoughts. There's been a ton that came out. So jumping right into it, OpenAI released Codex. This is a competitor to Claude Code. So Codex is a CLI that can essentially do things for you. If you just launch it in your terminal, ask it to do things, it'll just go away. And, kind of like the cursor or windsurf, which is built into the IDE, Codex and Claude Code are much different in the fact that you just run it on your terminal. It uses various like bash commands or binaries to go search for files, make file edits. Pretty similar end result for cursor. Like you get the stuff you want to get done, but it's a different user interface, different expectations, different workflows. And then I think one of the more interesting things about Codex is they have this kind of Codex cloud. And so Codex you can run on any machine. It can make edits to your files, your repo, etc. But Codex Cloud allows you to actually ask for changes on the ChatGPT mobile app. So what you can do is kind of give Codex access to your GitHub repository, fill out your kind of environment to run your application. So if you're using Laravel and Docker, you kind of have to set up the Docker container and configuration through their website. And then, which is pretty interesting to me, and they showcased in their announcement video, is you can open up the ChatGPT mobile app, go into Codex, kind of like choose your project. So for me, it'd be like my bill splitting app. And I could say, oh, can you refactor this bill splitting area to go from X to Y? And it'll then chug away on their server with like your environment, create a pull request on GitHub, and then you can then check that out locally and iterate on that. So it's a really cool kind of like intern in the cloud experience. And to be fair, I haven't done it yet, but it sounds really cool. The only problem is like getting that environment set up, I heard, is a little bit tricky. And for example, if you're using Xcode building iOS apps, good luck with that because Apple makes it really hard to set up Mac OS software. But if you're making any web apps or like maybe even React Native, I'm not 100% sure, but web apps are an excellent candidate for kind of Codex Cloud. So a really cool update. I think the trend is moving towards CLIs, and the fact that you can have something that you can chat with on the go and it does work for you and you can go review it later and kind of like continue its work. Very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. I saw the announcement. It's a bit over my head, but it looks really cool how it could just kind of do all that GitHub requests and all that kind of stuff. It's funny, the Xcode thing, because I guess just a general comment on Apple, I suppose. We touched on it before, but like I feel like Apple is really slow to move in relation to these other companies. And it's a shame that Xcode, which obviously, it's the IDE, right, of building iOS apps, that something everyone uses that has an iPhone, and it can build, it's not just iPhone, right? Like it's any Mac OS platform.
Yeah,
you build
iOS,
on Xcode.
Mac OS, iPad.
Yeah. It's a shame that you kind of aren't given the best tools in relation to what's out there now, like as opposed to if you were writing Android apps and stuff like that. So, and web apps, to your point. So yeah, it's interesting how that will all play out because, we've always thought of Apple, especially like when you and I were kind of coming up and 10 or 15 years ago, like they were the ones innovating, and it just feels like they're not that right now.
It's a different period. And interestingly enough, at our current recording date, not this week but the next week, is WWDC, their flagship developer conference. And there's been a few leaks reported that they're going to have like an AI skip year where people are expecting AI features, IDEs, whatever they can ship, because that's been the hot craze recently. But I think they're actually shipping a full iOS design change. So like massively changing the kind of default design language for all the apps, which to me sounds a little weird. They do this every, 10 years or so where they just change everything to get a refreshed look. We'll see how it ends up. But yeah, I agree. Apple is definitely lagging here. And there's been a lot of kind of articles written about key Apple like reporters and kind of in the news area about why Apple is struggling and what they're going to do about it. So yeah, definitely an interesting time. But moving on from Codex, pretty interesting. Another kind of big announcement was that Sam and Johnny Ive are now partnering together. So this one made a lot of headlines on Twitter for various reasons, which I'm sure you have some input about. But essentially, Johnny Ive, ex-Apple, created the iPhone, iPad, all these influential products that we use today, made a ton of money, then went and created this company, I.O. And I guess that the story of I.O. is that Johnny and a bunch of ex-Apple designers, they just pulled in the cream of the crop from Apple. I guess over the years that they've been together, continuously roping in great leadership and designers from Apple. And Apple kills it in the hardware space. They're clear leaders there. Like Meta trying to create their own headset. Maybe they have good engineers, but the hardware is hard to get those relationships and build the right things. And so I think OpenAI, as a very software focused company, has acquired Johnny Ive's like I.O company. Now they're one together, and they released this interesting video on YouTube talking about this partnership. And so their first product that they're going to release that's been kind of leaked, I'm not sure if it was officially leaked or not, but essentially some sort of pin, like a little square box that listens to conversations, maybe has a camera. You can imagine, if you heard of the like humane pin, some kind of pendant or something like that that listens to your conversations and gives you a different interface into ChatGPT. Because in the video, Sam kind of talks about, if I have a question with ChatGPT, I gotta pause what I'm doing, open up my phone, unlock it, open the app, click on new chat, type it in, click enter, and wait. And I agree, it sucks. Like, it'd be nice if I had immediate access to things in a more functional way. And that like 10-minute video, which has some interesting drama around it, is kind of highlighting that there is need for new hardware in terms of AI, kind of new experiences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I mean, my wife and I joke all the time, like our Alexa is just horrible. Like it
Mm-hmm.
never, and we have an older model. I don't know if like that would make a difference, to be honest, but like all we can really reliably use it for is like a kitchen timer and like converting measurements of like, ounces to grams, right? So I can totally see the need. It reminds me of these Black Mirror episodes. There's one where I think it's like when you record everything, it was basically like glasses or contacts that recorded everything. And it was, Black Mirror's a messed up show. But it feels like we're not that far away from that. And like, I personally, I don't know, like, if I really care to wait and like just type that in. I feel like that doesn't bother me. Everyone has their own preferences, of course. But like, I would have a hard time letting the devices that much into my control. Like, I like to control it and when it's on and when it's off.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I have Alexa, it's listening, I'm sure, I get all that, but at some level there's a stop for me where I go, this is too much. Like, I don't want you in every single part of my life. Like, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
So we'll see when we hit that point. It'll be interesting.
The last thing for OpenAI, which is just a short bit, is the responses API. So they have now added, I think, MCP support to their responses API. And for folks kind of saying, what the heck is the responses API? I feel you. Most of the chat APIs that we use today use like the chat completions API, which Gemini is built off of, OpenAI is built off of. It was the first kind of API design that OpenAI had pushed out to the world. And since everyone followed, everyone adopted that or are compatible with that. Responses API is their new generation of just unlocking more powerful behaviors, enabling new tools. So you can have like code execution, MCP servers. All these things are a little bit hard to tie in with their chat completions API. I've never touched it, but a cool, I think, eventual migration to this would be really powerful. So props to them for adding MCP servers. I can't wait till their desktop client adds that. I'm very, very ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And that was OpenAI, a ton of stuff. Second up, we have Claude, Anthropic. So Anthropic released Claude 4, that is Opus and Sonnet. And from the get-go, I was on vacation, but I saw the reaction online. I thought, oh, wow, people are really loving this. Like the user feedback. I mean, half of these things is benchmarks. So we're talking how well does it perform on a standardized test. And the other half is vibes. Sounds stupid, but if you've worked with these things, sometimes you ask it to do something and it doesn't do it. Other times it fills in to-dos in the code base, and you can kind of sit there scratching your head saying, something's a little off here, and it's hard to exactly articulate that. So that's how I describe vibes. So I've tried Claude 4 with Claude Code. Again, it's kind of their CLI coding machine, not like Cursor and Windsurf, but more in the terminal. It's freaking incredible. I love it. I'm blown away about how good it is, and it feels like the first model that I've used that I have full trust and understanding of what it's doing. And it's an incredible experience. I've only used it in Claude Code. I haven't really used it in any other IDEs, although I think Cursor has support for it, Windsurf doesn't. So that's one note. But yeah, I'll pause there. Have you tried it, or have you seen any of the Twitter hype?
I've seen a lot of the hype. And most of it's been kind of funny, I guess, is what I've seen. Because I guess, speaking of the vibes, like they all kind of have a different flavor. And I think we've touched on that before. And I haven't used, again, Anthropic that much. But I guess what and I'm curious if you have run into this, but what made its rounds to me on X was that Claude is super like affirming of whatever you say. And like, well, no
Huh.
matter what you give it, it'll say you're absolutely right. And like people had screenshots of it being like, oh, I'm a deadbeat, I'm a chain smoker, and it's like you're absolutely right. And so there's a tweet from Tony Din, and he
Okay,
like
yeah.
he has the Ben Affleck meme, and it's like Claude, and then it like speaking quotes like you're absolutely right, and then it's just like him like. So I'll link it in the show notes because it's pretty funny. But yeah, so it's been I haven't seen as much like about its capabilities other than it's good, but then yeah, that it seems like its personality or its persona is kind of on the like reaffirming you no matter what.
Yeah, yeah. Which can be a
yeah,
downside, to be fair. I think if
yeah,
it's too reaffirming, you're like, I don't really like that. I like a challenge in the right way.
right.
I
Yeah, I'll
think
have to try it
Gemini,
out.
yeah, I think Gemini 2.5 Pro did a decent job of being more challenging, where if you suggested something or you said this didn't work, I remember times explicitly it would come back to me and saying, no, I think it does. You should try this again. And that's when I'm
Yeah,
like, I like that.
right.
That is what I'm looking for. So I haven't had that experience where it's too agreeable. I've only been in Claude Code, and I ask things in the terminal, and it does a bunch of magic behind the scenes. I
Mhm.
think maybe in Cursor, when you ask kind of like raw queries, what you typed in goes directly to Claude 4. That could be different. So it really
Yeah.
depends on what you're working with. But one note I wanted to call out is during the release of Claude 4, they released this system card or research card. I can't remember the exact terminology, but what that is describing kind of like their approach to training it, the behaviors that they saw during training, kind of like their red teaming we talked about before, but essentially asking the model to do bad things and how they can stop bad actors from using the model based on this. How far can we get it to kind of disclose bad information? One of those, I think, red teaming attempts actually made Claude like quote unquote report things to the authorities. So during testing, you can imagine a scenario where, oh, I'm creating this biological weapon and I want to go deploy it in some area to, do harm. And I think they did that red teaming, and Claude was like quote unquote so smart that it was able to like backdoor email like the FBI saying like, hey, they're doing something bad, like I'm reporting you. And it made the waves on X, and people being like, oh, like, do we trust this model? Like, it's so smart, it's like better than us. I thought it was
Mhm.
quite interesting. And in the era of having MCP tools, MCP servers, these models are connected to external services. And the giant topic that came up was, if I had Claude attached to an email service or some sort of messaging service, could it do that to me? Like, could it,
Mhm.
report on things without me really knowing, or like do some subtle things behind the scenes? So a
Yeah.
very interesting conversation. I think we're getting to the point where these models are so smart that they are sussing out creative ways to bend the rules, get the rewards they need during training, and like have these kind of undisclosed behaviors. And to kind of finalize that bit, the person who wrote the tweet describing this actually deleted the tweet. I think they were from
Mhm.
Anthropic. So it's kind of like more controversy that during training this happened and the guy disclosed it. Everyone was like, holy crap. And then he deleted it. And then it, even caused more drama of like, should that not have been disclosed, etc. So
Yeah.
kind of odd.
I think it's interesting because every one of these foundational LLMs, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, they all kind of approach these things differently. And what's really interesting I've noticed about Anthropic is they tend to do the big headline and almost like the kind of, I don't want to say scare tactics. I don't know if that's the right word, but like
Mhm.
the CEO has recently come out and said
Yeah.
something about like it's going to be a white collar bloodbath or something like that. I don't know the
Yeah.
exact quote, but basically just saying that like AI is going to completely, which there's probably some truth to for sure. I don't disagree, but it's almost like that kind of marketing seems to be what they kind of go down. They kind of go down
Agreed.
like the very serious. Because I think the other thing I saw, I don't know where I saw this. I don't want to misspeak, but I think I saw somewhere that like supposedly Claude 4 can like make nuclear weapons. Like it knows how to, and like if
Hmm.
you prompt it, it'll like be like, oh, you got to go get plutonium, you got to go get uranium, and you got to, it kind of like will do that.
Yeah.
I can't remember where I saw that, but like basically, and like putting out that system card and stuff like that, they kind of seem to go on like the like we're so powerful, like oh, we've really almost crossed the line. It's almost dangerous. They kind of go that route. I don't know if it's a lot of marketing, get people to talk about it. There's probably some truth to it, but like how much, I don't know. Something I noticed as you were talking about it.
Yeah. I think they do have a different marketing strategy, and like OpenAI tries to showcase a different flavor of things you can do with ChatGPT, and it's very much the average person, where I think Anthropic goes off the deep end, and sometimes in an odd way that you're not expecting that to be marketing, but maybe they have big thoughts about how it could spark controversy to get eyeballs onto it, which is a different way of marketing. It definitely works, but yeah, maybe it's not for everybody.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Let me take Google I.O. So I hit that one. Cool. Yeah. So another one that was happening while Brad was out enjoying life was Google I.O. I didn't watch every single day, but they had a lot of really cool announcements and things that they were talking about. I think the one that is super interesting and like just really cool that they demoed was VO, which is the video generation that is just compared to what it was a year ago is insane. I mean, they can add in dialogue, they can add in background noises. It looks pretty good. You can still tell, like you can still kind of catch bits and pieces of it, but for a lot of purposes, it's good enough, And so that was really cool. They also demoed, I think, like a try-on feature where, like, if you kind of hook up your account the right way, you can, as you're shopping for clothes, try on different clothes that you were looking at and kind of see how it would look on you, which is actually really interesting because I remember seeing a Chrome extension that someone had built with OpenAI that they built that and were selling that Chrome extension. Yeah, that's how fast things move around here. So that was really cool. And I think the part that I was really interested in even more so, and this is what I was texting Brad, was some of the announcements they made on like the agent SDK and like the whole agent to agent protocol. Because basically the thought was, at some point in the near future, we're going to have all these different agents doing different things. And I think the example that I saw on YouTube is, you'll have like a travel agent, and then that agent can work with, when you think about travel, when you went to Japan and Korea, you had to book your flights, you had to book your hotel, you might have had to book a rental car, I don't know, but you say you had to book a rental car. Your travel agent, normally this is a human being, would go and get all that arranged for you and then have it set up for you. So that way, when you come in, you're ready to go. You got everything you need. It's all taken care of. But that's the whole kind of business model of a travel agent for those who haven't ever used one. And so basically it was saying, if you had a LLM enabled travel agent, say you built one with Google Gemini, you have this agent that's going to be responsible for handling all those different tasks. So you have the hotel, the flights, and then you have the rental car, and those different kind of tasks would be agents themselves. So like if the travel agent went and talked to the hotel agent could say, these are our rooms that are available, would you like to book one, for whatever your dates are. Same thing for the flights. And so basically that back and forth between agents, completely independent of any human intervention, that's kind of where there's a ton of opportunity, but like it's not really right now like kind of set up. Like it's kind of, we're in the Wild West, I guess, on that front. Right now we have MCP, which is, again, that's new as of November of 2024. So like that's still very green. And what Google is trying to call out is MCP is great, but like that's kind of more an agent talking to like a singular service or like a database, not another agent. And so that's what the A2A protocol was talking about. So they have a GitHub that you can look at. I think it's written in TypeScript and Python. It's pretty bare. This is what the YouTube video. I'll find the link and make sure we include it with the guy that walked through it. But like you have things like agent cards where like it kind of tells you, okay, this is what this agent does, and it's meant for the agent to see, the other agents to see and kind of understand, okay, this is how I should interact with that agent. So really cool. Ton of I think further work to go, but like when they talk about it, it's definitely like you could see this becoming a thing, like where this is going to be used, because we're going to have agents everywhere, kind of what we talked about earlier, like agent overload. There's going to be agents everywhere, and how they communicate with each other, it needs to be kind of standardized and ironed out.
Yeah, this is the year of the agents. I think that's been the theme of this year so far. And I wonder how effective that is, because as I've noticed the agent workflows, the more deep the workflow is, the higher the chance of error. If there's, 10 tasks, 15 tasks, each task has some sort of failure rate. You compound that over, subsequent tasks. So then you have two agents have their own task tree. You can imagine at some point it's likely to break down. So I wonder how much Google spent in terms of actually testing this and the reliability of agent to agent. Because to me, one agent is still getting there. I wonder how agent to agent, how good that holds up over the long term. I imagine as intelligence gets better, it's a lot easier So it's easy to say that, next 6 months, a year, it could be a reality. Maybe they're entering that in early. Also, props to Google for defining that, because I think MCP was Anthropic's baby, I think is how it came out, if I remember correctly. Yeah. And each company tries to pave the way, if not for their company, for the open source land. Like sometimes it's a little bit confusing to figure out if that's, Google trying to put a stake in and saying we're leading this for our products, or we're leading this for the general AI community. I think MCP definitely felt on the more open source side. I wonder how A to A will feel if people will adopt it. I think the successful protocols are people jump on board, start using it, the hype continues, and boom, it's mainstream. Haven't heard too much about A to A. I think it's interesting. Once we get higher intelligence, maybe that thing just pops right back up, and it's a protocol that everybody uses.
Yeah, and the other couple things real quick on the Google I.O. that was really interesting is, one, they kind of said that, Gemini or Google, I guess they have their own like agent framework. So OpenAI has an agent SDK, Google does as well. But they said they also built like the infrastructure to host agents on like Google Cloud, and it doesn't have to be their agent. They said support this. They support LangChain / LangGraph, because that's kind of a similar thing a little bit. So, you can build out really complex agent workflows in LangGraph and host them on Google Cloud. It doesn't have to be the Gemini agents, which is kind of cool. So, yeah. And the last other thing that was really funny, and we can move off Google I/O. The CEO Sundar, right? I think is his name.
Mm-hmm.
He said something that was, AI helps me be a better friend, because what they did was you can opt into having Gemini read your emails and understand who you are and how you would respond to emails or texts and stuff like that. And they were showing that, like, if you do that, and like say a friend wants to schedule a coffee with you, Gemini can just like auto reply and look at your calendar, see if you have availability, and like auto reply as if it was you, where it sounds like you and types like you and everything. And you said this helps you be a better friend, which I thought was just so, I don't know, like just sad, honestly, because it just feels like, if you don't have any time to put into people, then like, is that really your friend? But yeah, I thought it was funny. But
yeah. And last note on Google I.O. is there's always a competition between OpenAI and Google. Just repeatedly, if Google releases something, OpenAI comes the day after. And funnily enough, the company that OpenAI acquired was called I.O. And I think it happened the day after I.O. And so it was even more a stab in the back at OpenAI trying to one-up Google by just, if you're searching for I.O., maybe you're searching for Google I.O., but now you're getting OpenAI acquires I.O., which is, confusing nonetheless. But we'll move on. The last one I want to talk about is DeepSeek. So there's been a lot of hype around when is DeepSeek going to release their next model. The TLDR is it's out now, and they called it DeepSeek R1 0528, which is just the date in there. And there's a little bit of controversy saying it's pretty good. I haven't looked at the full benchmarks, and usually I get the indication of if it's really good based on the hype that it generates on Twitter. Not the best kind of understanding, but it's a good proxy in terms of how many people are using it, how many people talk about it. I haven't heard too much about it. Exciting release. We'll need to dive into it. It's so fresh. Right now it's June 1st when we're recording, so only a few days after it came out. We need a little bit more time to see it flesh out. But the one note I want to call out is people were a little bit confused if it got renamed last minute. So there's been a decent amount of controversy saying these models take months to train and then they're released. And say if you're training the next DeepSeek R2, maybe the next like generation of DeepSeek, and then OpenAI releases, O4 High or Claude 4 comes out, you kind of feel like, oh, my timing is not that great. Let me go change the model name to not be V2, but to be V1.5, for example. So there's a little bit of a controversy on X talking about, should this have been DeepSeek, R2 or V2 to call it? Or is it, and was it always originally R1 with an updated version? So if you've used it, please let us know in the comments. I think I haven't used it. I will wait until people tell me to use it. That's kind of how I stand. And I think the open source getting better always helps everybody. So I applaud them for releasing something that, will stand the test of time. I think Meta had a little bit of trouble with their Llama models coming out at the time that they did. The results that they got, a little bit of benchmark fuddling. This one, I think, has a little bit more ground to stand on.
It's remarkable how confusing the naming is for all these. I think Llama or Meta has the best one because Llama 70B and like Llama whatever 700B, like you can kind of at least gauge some level there. Between OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and DeepSeek. It's like, can't we just name V1, V2, V3? Yeah, I don't know. It's just seems like we're overcomplicating.
That's too simple. That's too simple.
I guess. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, hats off to them for naming. Once they get a little bit better on the model support and intelligence side, that will make our lives easier.
Yeah.
Cool. So
yeah.
that was a bunch of roundups, much more info than I expected, but let's dive into Claude Code. So I have been extremely excited to talk about this. Since I got back from my honeymoon, I was eager to try it out, let alone the hype on X really pushed me. So to give another kind of preface of Claude Code, this is Anthropic's kind of terminal application to get coding changes done. It's not only coding, but that's primarily what I've seen online. Claude Code is essentially ChatGPT or Cursor in your terminal. And so how to install it is basically you can npm install, which just installs it as a package on your computer, but you use this global flag so that you can run literally Claude is the word to launch it on your terminal. So I was really excited. I downloaded it when I got back. I installed it with one line, booted it with one line. And the first thing you do is run this /init command. So when you run Claude, you see a text box at the bottom, similar to ChatGPT, Cursor, etc. You're not inside an IDE, you're just simply on the terminal. And so you start out with /init. What that does is it looks at your code base, scans various tools, architecture, design patterns, and basically tries to give Claude a summarization of what your code base looks like, maybe the health of the code base, the tools that you use, like Docker, for example, Laravel, React, or Vue, a high-level picture that you'd give like an intern. So that's kind of the first step. Once that's done, then you can go to town. And literally when I say go to town, you could ask it to do anything. And this is because their models have gotten so good. So I think the first few hours that I was using it, I was asking it to essentially fix a bunch of linting errors. So these errors that popped up in my kind of JavaScript, TypeScript code base, I didn't have the time to fix them, although they're important, kind of like edge cases. So I wanted to give Claude something that was very easy to know that there's an error here and I need to go fix it. And the reason why this is different is because in Cursor, I have to go find the file, open it up, say, hey, I have a few linting errors here, please fix it. Cursor does hook in with the linter, so it's not information it can't see. So Claude isn't new on that front, but it's a little bit more manual. What I had told Claude was a bit more open-ended. Usually when I approach these AI IDEs, I'm very specific. I say, this is my project, this is the feature, this is the file, this is the issue. With Claude Code, I saw people have pretty good success with more, kind of wide-ranging, less narrow prompts. I thought, okay, if it can do well on a wide-ranging prompt and like get my intent, that's pretty good. And again, I think the difference there is, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but Claude Code does things behind the scenes that make your prompt better. And I think Cursor is a little bit more transparent, and they take what you type and go directly to OpenAI servers or Anthropic servers. And so my first kind of task was, fix linter issues. And it basically said, I'm going to go read your code base. I'm going to create a to-do list. And then for each of the files that are affected, I'm going to go in and fix it one by one. And it killed it. I was shocked. And you run this command in the terminal, you see it kind of chugging through, oh, I found this file, I'm going to update it. You kind of see the diff. So you see like red lines are removed, green lines are added, and it goes through each single file. And the one thing that kind of made me a little bit scared is there's a token counter over time. So it describes your usage. And how Claude is set up initially is you pay per usage, which is really good because if you're doing small tasks, you only pay what you need. If you're doing large tasks, you're going to pay a lot of money. My task was in the middle ground. It wasn't a massive refactor, but it definitely wasn't small because it's touching a lot of files, a lot of little things everywhere. And so I think after I'd done that one task, I think it cost me $15. And this was maybe after an hour and a half of kind of maybe a few prompts here or there to kind of narrow it in. But essentially there's $15 of usage. And I thought that was so worth it. But I do want to go bigger. I want meteor changes. I want deeper kind of integrations within Claude Code. Where should I go from there? And then I took a look at the pricing. I saw people talk about it on X, and they have multiple plans. So one, the default one is pay per usage. Two, they have a max plan at $100 a month, which gives you quote unquote 5x the limits. And again, 5x is very ambiguous. They do not describe it very well on what that looks like, which gives people a lot of pause. And then the one that I chose because I felt the power and just wanted to dive in, Claude has a max plan at $200. And that one officially gives you 20x the usage. And again, who knows what 20x means? I haven't hit a limit. I've been going ham on it, but
Mhm.
my gut feeling is that the intelligence is there, so their Claude 4 models work extremely well with their kind of like terminal tool.
Mhm.
Two, I think their feedback loop is excellent because they're creating the models and they're creating the tools. This is the only company that exists today that is doing that and doing it well. So Cursor has their own like SWE models, which are like kind of aimed at editing files. So you'll use OpenAI to get the diff, then you'll use like a SWE model to apply the code changes because it's cheaper. But Claude and Anthropic, this is the first time that I've seen extreme high intelligence, extreme agentic use, and those two together, oh my god, it's incredible. So I use a lot of AI tools. I try to be very honest and describe my feelings. And this is the first $200 a month that I felt I will probably keep paying for this. And I talked to Ben a little bit about this earlier, but AI things change fast. So if there's something like Codex gets upgraded, which is OpenAI's equivalent of Claude Code, I might switch over. But right now, I am sitting very happy with, using Claude Code to make big edits, having $200 a month of unlimited pricing. You can even have multiple Claude Codes. So I work on my web app in Laravel, my React Native app. I can have 2 sessions running at the same time, just chugging away. And I think one of the big differentiators between Claude Code and others is that they have thought very, very deeply about the terminal experience. There's hotkeys for everything. You can auto accept things. If it runs a terminal command, you could say, I want you to run it, or I want you to run it. And anytime you ask me again, auto yes or no, and tell me what to do differently. So like the interface is different. Their defaults are good. It's secure by default. It doesn't index your code like Cursor does, or if you boot up a project, Cursor's like, hey, don't ask me anything until I index it, which means they take all your code, they shove it to their servers, makes it easier to find the right code. Claude just does that in real time. They don't index it all. They just search for your code when they need it. So it works with like millions of lines of code, which is incredible. Like I don't have a ton of code, but I have more than what, maybe is on average, and it just kills it. So
Yeah.
I'll pause there. That was a long, long bit about it, but I am very happy with it. And I think based on my experience in the past 3 days, I would say everyone should try it. If you're writing a lot of code, it's freaking incredible. I really have no large complaints.
Is 200 the new $20? In terms of like an app, because I feel like because OpenAI, the one that I can't remember what they called it, but the OpenAI plan that you tried
It's
was
like
$200,
Pro, maybe, I think.
Yeah. And now Claude is the max one is 200, and then we didn't touch on it, but Google, they released something that was $200 a month where it had like you got the
250,
data.
I think, actually.
It was 250. Okay,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, I'm like, is that the new goalpost? For like charging a software app these days?
I think it is, and again, I did buy the Pro OpenAI, and that gave me deep research early, multiple deep research queries. I think early access to one of the models, which was like only a week early. So they release it for Pro, then they wait a week and release it for Plus, and then they release it for normal or whatever. Definitely not worth it. I wish it was, because I'm happy to pay money for things that are worth it.
But you didn't use the operator, because that was something that came with it too.
I did
right?
not use it. Yeah. Again, I think these features, if I use them and I found value, I would keep going.
Yeah,
And I think I'm not alone in the fact that I felt like it was clunky, and I don't see anybody using it now. And again, a lot of these things maybe are too early. The model intelligence isn't good enough, or the UI isn't where it needs to be. I think Claude Code for $200 a month, unlimited usage. Again, I haven't hit limits, but I'm sure if you ran on 5 repos at once, 24 hours a day, you'll hit some sort of limit. But effectively no limits for a single developer. It's incredible. And again, I think the feedback loop they have of building the models, building the tool, and then they dog food and use it every day. They have like YouTube videos up describing that, like, instead of onboarding engineers into their company with a general onboarding, they give you Claude Code. You just ask questions like, how does this code base work? What do we do for this? What do we do for that? It's like a very empowering tool that you can not only write code, but understand code very well. And I've been going off the deep end. So I'll do a short story on building an MCP server with Claude Code. So I did this kind of linting approach to fix some of the TypeScript issues in my Laravel app. That worked well. That's when I saw I was being charged, $15, $20 for the tokens that I'd used. And I thought, if I do this 4 times a day, I want to be charged $80. And if I do this, multiple days, I want to go way over $200. So that was an easy purchase. And again, $200 is not accessible for everyone. So I agree that It's very much like if you have the ability to pay 200 to get the value, it's extremely worth it. If it's not accessible for you, I think prices will come down in the future. It's hard to say for sure. But for me, it was extremely worth it. And so I went on the second journey of using Claude Code, which is the most complicated part of my bill splitting app is basically when you add an expense to the system, it calculates who owes who and then updates the balances. So you can think of balances as the kind of summation of your debts. So each expense changes who owes who, which are the debts. And then those debts are summed up to make a balance. So if I owe you $20, that could be $10 from one expense, $3 from another expense, and $7 from another. So each individual expense has debts. Those roll up into the balances. Seems straightforward, but you'd be surprised at how complicated the code is to manage some of this core critical logic. And it's core and critical because if any of that goes wrong, trust is gone within my app. No one wants to see things that say, this doesn't add up. So I have code that works. It's a little bit of a behemoth in the fact that it's a large file that does everything all at once, hard to change, hard to modify. So I told Claude, hey, this is the core logic. It does X, Y, Z. This is how my database is set up. I really need a better, healthier code base in this area. I need you to, break things down into components, test each component, create kind of like a mega component that composes these individual things and go. And it just was really incredible. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that it creates this to-do list. So what that means is you have a large task. It'll then do like meta-analysis on your task and say, I've created 6 to-dos. 1 is analyze the code. 2 is figure out, what I need to change. 3 is like plan those changes across files. And it'll write it to a markdown file within your repo. So you can go look at it. It'll say, this is what your code does. This is what I propose. And then once it's done with the initial planning, it'll write another kind of in progress doc, which says, based on this task, I've done this. It's an excellent way to trace what it's doing. And as it goes through each of those tasks in the terminal, it'll check it off. So I'm not confused like what it's doing. It's very much in front of you, easy to understand. Mm-hmm. And it was incredible. Like I wrote, I think 7,000 lines of code across like 30 files. And you might think, oh, that's too much. Sounds complicated. And yes, it's a complicated part of the code base. And even after Claude had wrote V1, it said, I think I might have over-engineered this. And I thought, aha, you might have, you really might have. And so it's like, from where we are now, what should we do? Should we stop and redo it again? Should we do a slight refactor? And I said, hey, I want to do this once. I want to do it right. So if you see over-engineered bits, like let's go spend a little bit more time there. And so basically, I'm like 90% of the way done with this. I've been running Claude Code in various sessions. So maybe one session for 4 hours, another session for another like 5 hours. And then I'm probably at 10 hours working on one task, which sounds like it's too long. But I've chosen their top model, Opus, which essentially is the slowest, but the smartest. That's what I'm paying for. That's what I want. And it's almost there. So I'll report back on the next podcast. But if it can crack the most complicated part of my code base with relatively hands-free, again, I know how AI tools work. I want to get them as much information as possible to make it do well. So I do step in from time to time. But it's done so much better than I'd imagine Cursor or Windsurf could do. And I'm like completely blown away. And the one thing I want to add there is I talked about MCP servers, but didn't even mention it. The reason why I wanted that is because Claude integrates with MCP servers. And so as it's refactoring my Laravel app, Laravel has debug tools that tell you what queries were ran, like how much memory was used. So essentially, yes, I can refactor and write tests, but I can't actually do like the integration, which I describe as opening up the web browser, creating an expense and clicking create. That'll then run the code. The code will then do a bunch of stuff. And then we can go look at what that code did. So I integrated Playwright, which is essentially a browser automation tool that I can describe. Go to the expenses page, click on the create expense button, fill in the form, click submit. Now, once you're done with that, hook into this new Laravel MCP debug server and say, go look at the last request and pull out, the MySQL queries, the memory usage, and then compare that from before and after. And so it was just crazy. Like the feedback loop and the tools that Claude has access to and its intelligence to know how to use them, which is a whole nother topic, blew me away. And so I had posted on Twitter yesterday, I think, and I was like, hey, is anyone building kind of MCP servers for Laravel? And again, what I mean is Claude only is as good as the context that it knows or the tools that it has access to. And as I found it refactoring my code, it said, hey, this works. But then when I go test it, it didn't work. And I go, well, if I gave it the access to test it itself, then it would know that it didn't work. How can I enable that access? And
Yeah.
so I'm just now kind of prototyping this MCP server. I'll probably open source it. Got a bunch of hype on Twitter, at least for me. You know, I post things and don't get many views, but this one I think was like 11K views, 80 likes, you know, retweeted by Taylor. So you could tell I'm on the right path of like, I think more people are going to be adopting Claude Code. With that, we need to basically take what you can use as a developer and shove that into the AI tool so the AI can use it. And so, long segment, but I am a complete fan of Claude Code. I am going off the deep end, trying to run it as much as I can with no limits and trying to give it as many powers and tools that I would use in my day-to-day coding journey. And so far, I would give it like 8.5, 9 out of 10. I think, you know, just getting it that last mile. Higher intelligence would be great, but not needed. Giving it the tools that it needs maybe could use a little bit of work. But yeah, the experience is great. The models are great. The way I use it is very, very easy. If you have the money and you have a complicated task and you want to speed up your workflow and build awesome software, I have my complete recommendation behind it as of June 1st.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, it's interesting because it touches on an aspect of like, it's almost like you have an intern, you know, that kind of just does a lot of the stuff for you. And it's like an intern and also like a tutor because it does things for you. But then also if you have questions, it'll answer it. So, you know, and that goes to the whole point, you know, how you mentioned earlier about like the year of agents, you know, being able to have something, and I'm not going to say someone because that's too weird, have something, whether it's Codex or Claude Code or any of these other agents that we've talked about, where you can use them as a resource to do meaningful work because the intelligence is good, because the tooling is good. Like that's a huge win. And I think a lot of people can start to kind of theorize. And like, I think as a call to action for the show, like if, you know, as listeners, like what can you think about like, gosh, if I could have someone do something, you know, while I'm enjoying my weekend or while I'm sleeping, that would be meaningful and impactful to me. That's kind of where an agent plugs in, you know? And I think the balancing act is, I don't know how much, you know, in your case, you had to kind of like babysit it, you know, or could you hit the terminal and go walk and have a coffee and come back and have everything done for you? You know, that's probably something that I'd be curious to know. Like, did you feel like you could send it off and wish it well and then come back later, or were you kind of babysitting it?
Yeah, there's a bit of nuance because as you first start using it, you have these permissions that pop up with security. So it's like, hey, can I run this bash command? Maybe that's list the files in your directory. Read-only operation, very safe. The opposite end of the spectrum, can I run the rm command to remove a file? You have to be very careful there. I usually don't say, I don't say yes and always yes. I just say yes. But for any of these, like 90% of the commands that it suggests to run, I go, yes, you can do it. And don't ever ask me again because I want you to be productive. And if I have to sit there and go, yes, 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 it's not that fun, not that productive. So I think the initial learning curve of knowing how the tool works, writing good queries, and kind of accepting all these security prompts, a little bit painful. But once you spend an hour or two with it, I would basically ask it a query. And depending on how hard that was, the harder it was, the more time I had to go, you know, take a walk, take a sip of coffee, do whatever. And I would give it intentionally hard things. So even one time, my tests weren't passing in this large refactor. I described the issue. I gave it to Claude and said, like, don't, you know, think really deeply. They have this stupid keyword called think ultra deeply. So I would, you know, use that from time to time. And then I would actually make my computer not go to sleep using like amphetamine or some sort of caffeinate program on Mac, and then wake up in the morning and it's done. And that to me is insane. Like I've never had an AI tool where I could say go and it's done. You know, Cursor does a good job to like suggest to run things. And there's like YOLO mode on Cursor, which auto approves all commands. But again, Cursor is like an IDE that tries to fit, you know, OpenAI, Google models, Anthropic models into their experience. They do a lot of effort to kind of coerce these models. I think Claude is breaking ground here, just like Codex is, where they create the model, they create the tool. They've thought deeply about the experience in terms of security and just like the whole flow. Once you start using it, you're like, this is easy to interrupt. So if it's doing something, you press the escape command and say, don't do this, do that. And you can do it anytime. Like if you've used some of these AI apps, like interrupting things sometimes just breaks the whole UI and it's a bunch of jankiness. Like they've done a great job on that. So I think to answer your question, once you have permission set up and you have a large enough task, I would ask something and come back in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And maybe it finished in 10 minutes because it was easier than expected. But there are lots of times where it would write something, the tests fail, which was a great feedback loop, and they keep iterating. It would even write debug, like dumping out information in the console, and it would then read that information, get insights, and then fix the tests, which I thought was freaking awesome. Like I didn't even tell it, hey, while you're running the test, dump out information so yourself can see it. But it's smart enough to know that. So I don't have to tell it like how to do these things. So
That's
yeah, I
crazy.
was blown away. I'm now hooking up MCP servers so I can take even more steps back because again, there are times where it told me the test pass. That's great, but does the integration work? And it didn't. And again, like all AI tools and models that I've been accustomed with, it never one shots really complicated stuff. If you're expecting that, you're definitely not there. We're not there yet, but it gets you about 90% of the way there. You have to guide it along that route, and you have to do that last 10%. But if I were to do this refactor, it would have taken me at least a month. Would have been hell. It's one of those things I don't really need, but I thought this is the hardest task I can think of because it's looking at the slop of code that I've written, which is way harder to understand than new code. Easy to write new code. This is go look at, quote unquote legacy old code that's ugly and non-pretty with no comments, figure that out, refactor, write tests, make sure it works, and make sure integration works. And again, I'm like 90% of the way there. I'm pretty confident I can get it to the final mile, although sometimes that can be more challenging than expected. But if it can do that, it has my full stamp of approval of like, it took the hardest thing, it did it with, with class, wrote good code. I spent $200 on it, and I have a lot more to give once it's done with that. That if it can do this, hell, I don't even know. Like we're limitless. And again, as we look at all these AI tools, today is the best or the worst it's going to be. And if it can solve this today, I am slightly concerned, to be quite honest, where we can go from here, because this is one of the harder problems that I think any engineer would take a look at. If you throw in any engineer, I don't care how good they are, into my code base, into this file, and say fix it, like that's going to take a long time. Like my code's not that bad, just to be clear, it's not that bad. It's just a lot for someone without context. And Claude did not have a ton of context into my project, and I gave it a lot, but still it's not perfect. There's a lot in my head that I can't describe.
Yeah. Well, what's so interesting about, engineering of any discipline, but I guess specific to software engineering in the setting that we're talking about it is, you can build something 100 different ways. And so the way that Bradley built something might not be the same way that, me or some other person might build something. And so for, an AI to come in and be able to kind of see how you thought of things and like suggest improvements on that is significant in my opinion, because that's kind of basically saying it's understanding what you're trying to do, and obviously you're prompting it to like, hey, I need you to refactor this, blah blah blah. But like then it scans the code base and kind of goes, oh, this, I don't know Laravel that well, but like, oh, this class is this, and then this, eloquent model is this, like, and it kind of understands how you thought of things when you were going through and building your code base. And that's very different than like very deterministic like work. And I think accounting has a lot of deterministic work where it's like, if you see a transaction from your bank feed that is coded to Wells Fargo, you're going to know from history that goes to a certain GL account. And so it's very black and white, and not all accounting is like that. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying all of it's like that, but there's a lot of, automation that exists now because it's deterministic, rules of like, if you see this, then X, or if you see this, then this, then it's Y, in engineering and just, again, building anything in general, there's like, you kind of impart Bradley when you build something, and when I build something, I kind of impart Bennett into how I build it. And yeah, it's impressive that AI can see that. And of course, to your point about it being scary and, what it means for the future, like, yeah, it's the pace and, it's almost like it's not sinister. I don't want to give it that impression, but like, it's almost one of those things where it's like you catch yourself using it, and then you need to make sure that you're not losing your skills, and I'm not, I'm not saying you, but like, as someone who is using all these tools and stuff like that, it's important to be thinking about, how you're using it, how it works under the hood, what parts do you need to kind of step in and be directly involved with.
Absolutely.
Levels, I'm not sure if you saw this, but Levels had a tweet about a week or so ago where he was talking about how he used AI. I don't know what model and what he was using, but I'll find the tweet. I'm sure he put it in there. But he basically said I needed to like move my database from one system to the next, and I wanted to copy it over and then upload it. But basically, it like deleted a bunch of shit, a bunch of stuff. Excuse me. And he was saying, luckily, he had backups, so that's why you have backups, and it was no big deal. But he was kind of saying like this, there's still some gaps here.
Yeah.
But so there's things that you still need to be involved with. And so like, you need to use your judgment and figure out like, to your point earlier, like anytime you see RM pop up on like the suggested terminal command.
Yeah.
Like, okay, hold on, let's pause. Let me see what
yeah,
you're
I
talking
definitely
about.
pause on that one.
yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, but the pace is crazy because in 6 months, that might not even be something that maybe that's fixed, or like
Yeah.
it's so much better that you don't have to worry about that. It's
Yeah.
definitely possible,
Yeah. I would definitely like beckon people to think. I think now is kind of the age of you can spend $200 and write any software you want. And there's a large caveat that any software is a large kind of bucket. You can write things that are very specific to what you need, and Claude can do that for you excellently, especially for a new code base. Again, working in an existing code base where there's tens of thousands of lines of code written with an intention and, like Ben said, a meaning behind it and a story behind it, that's a lot harder. But if you want to build anything right now, you can spend $200, go to Claude, boot it up while you're watching TV, while you're brushing your teeth. You literally just start a Claude session, ask it to do something. Once it stops or it finishes, you come back, answer a question that it had, or if it's done with that task, ask it to do the next one. And like, oddly enough, this is how I've been living my life the past few days. Is it like, Friday night I'm watching TV, I'll have Claude Code up and running, working on my refactor while I'm watching TV. And yes, as a new Claude Code user, I'm a little bit more hands-on, like having to approve these one-time security and saying, yes, don't ask me again. RM comes up, I'm taking another look. If I catch it in a loop where it's not making progress, I'll step in. But for the most part, I would say 70% plus of my queries are like, more or less automated. This parts where I have to step in, I've used a bunch of AI tools, so I know. So maybe for someone who's less familiar, it's a lot more hands-on, but for someone who's familiar with the tooling, how to prompt, what I can get out of it, where I think it struggles, it's very automated in a way that like I would challenge the listeners to say, what do you want to build? If you want to build it now, go spend $200, open up Claude Code. It's not only good for Laravel code base, it's good for any code base. You can literally ideate anything and get rolling. It's not going to be the Salesforce of the world. It's not going to be some crazy, big SaaS product. You can build a SaaS, but there's a lot more to it, like deployment, marketing, etc., that it's not good at yet. But like any personal software is very much in the realm of being created. I think there's this large conversation on X I see pop up that models are getting better. Will that be less software or more software? And I think as I've come to use these tools, I think only more. Again, this is just my opinion, but as I see it, as I'm empowered to do more, this is just automating things that I wanted to do that I didn't have the time to do. Now, again, I can open up a Claude session and have it do anything. Like during the podcast, I had it, write me a whole QuickBooks replacement that I'm going to try after this. Just kidding. It didn't do that. But I
was going to say, I was like, wow, that's an odd request. Good luck.
Exactly what I'm saying. Like it could be chugging along right now as I do something. I think it's at a unique time where the model is powerful. The tools are correct. There's high trust, high autonomy, high agency, as we talked about the year of agents. And now is the time. If you want any software, just try it out. If you're not an engineer, just talk about it as best you can and it'll get there. If you are an engineer, take your engineering chops and just feed it in and try to build something that you thought wasn't possible. I think it's an excellent time to tinker, and it's pretty much the peak of intelligence right now, I would say, is in Claude Code. The peak of building software, I would position in Claude Code today.
Yeah, that's cool. I think the point about, will there be more software or less software? And I think you were going this direction, but just to kind of reiterate too, it seems like there'll be more like personalized software because it's so easy. You can just spin it up for yourself. And, we made a distinction that like putting code into production that people will pay for as like an app, that's there's a lot we could say on that, but like it's not that simple. But like using Claude or using any kind of model to like generate you some scripts that do something for you, for sure, that's super easy. And I liken it to, it feels like in the 1950s and 60s there was fewer television channels. It was like I don't know exactly how much, I wasn't born then, but like it was like I think 7 or 8 channels, right, that would be broadcast on the old TVs. And now, there's 1,000 channels. And it feels like that's going to be kind of similar. Like there's a channel about hunting. There's a channel about, telenovelas. There's a channel about professional bowling. Like there's almost a flavor for every single person. And I feel like software's going to kind of get that way too, where it's like, I'm an accountant who loves technology and I like, certain business models. Like maybe there'll be a software that's kind of specifically in that little niche, or niche. And then maybe, for Brad, he's a Laravel diehard and he likes productized SaaS and he also loves food. Maybe there'll be some kind of like little specialized, product or app that you just use there, so it feels like it can kind of go deeper in your own interests. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Maybe you have, much more much more like SaaS or like just kind of products, but just kind of for fewer, customer base, but like maybe, more money. I don't know. But like, yeah, it just seems like you can kind of go deeper in those different areas.
Yeah, I think the common one I hear, which always hurts a little bit, but I think is a good example is, oh, I'm gonna like I hate Splitwise. I'm gonna go create my own bill splitting app. And I think with all these AI tools, it feels very easy to like, spin up something that I could just go split a bill like a receipt. It's not rocket science, so to speak, but the whole experience, workflow, getting people to join like groups, all of that added together, and then deploying that and making sure it works and keeping it up and stable and fast and scaling it. All of those bits are the things that AI is not that great at yet. It's not going to deploy for you. It's not going to figure out the optimal performance. All of those things, it's like a canonical example of, oh, I don't like X, I'm going to go spin up my own version. But if you had your own like local version of Splitwise, not that useful. I can't share it to people and say, go enter in a bill that you had on our trip together because it's not deployed. There's various things that you immediately run into this wall and you go, oh, I don't know how to do that. And AI can't help me that much. It can do a better job than it used to, but it's not there yet where I can say, build me, QuickBooks locally, deploy it in 1 second. And then when things go down, fix it, auto deploy, whatever. You can imagine some complicated system that could do pretty well, but we're not there yet. So I think building things locally that you use, either, an iPhone app, a website that you pull up on your own computer, input data, it stores it, analyzes it, whatever, fantastic. I think building SaaS from the ground up and having a robust foundation, good deployment, good maintainability, that's not there yet. And so that's the caveat I like to put on it is pay $200 a month, build some you only software. I like to call it Life OS, build stuff that you care about, that you want, that is not going to be shared with others unless you kind of like show them your iPhone screen if it's an app, or you show them the website on your local computer. But even then, I still think there's an abundance of usages. And I hope more software, better models, the loop continues. And we just have some really cool products and experiences that help improve people's lives, because all the automations I try to do is just make my life easier, more efficient, so I can do things that I care about. And I think there's a lot of automations in the future that are really going to push the needle and give people hopefully a lot more free time, or a lot more time focusing on the things that, they provide the value, not kind of like their grunt work or less exciting work that I hope AI can automate, and automate with high confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. I don't know though, bro. I've seen so many tweets saying that you can literally build a cash flowing SaaS in under 10 minutes. So I don't know if you might be outdated, Brad. There's a lot of that out there.
Don't get me started. If you tweet with that, prefix, you might be muted from me.
Yeah. Prefix with literally just instant mute. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's the AI share, I guess. I don't know what the right word is, but the AI reshare is always literally, we can do this.
We'll wrap this up here because I know we're going long, but there's a whole business model now of putting out stuff like that, saying you can literally do X. They just do some really basic example that's not really useful. And then they try and sell you a school community or a Thinkific course on just doing that. It's horrible. Like, I'm sorry. I just got to get it off my chest because it's kind of tapping into a fear of like FOMO to get people to be like, I don't know how to do that. I need to look at that. And then, let me join this community. I'm not saying communities are bad. Don't get me wrong. I'm in a community and it's awesome, but like, just be mindful of like how they're marketing to you. And if it feels like they're tapping into the FOMO, or like they're making it sound easier than it really is, to Brad's point, Brad has a literal SaaS app. He can tell you firsthand it's not easy. It doesn't take literally 10 minutes. So just be mindful of that, because if it's too easy, it probably ain't right. Just as a general rule.
A lot of that stuff is repackaged too. So I think you'll see in the comments like, oh, you got this from X or you got this from Y. And I do follow a few of the aggregators, but in essence, if you could follow the source, that's probably the better long-term strategy. Give the credit where credit is due, instead of this, a few folks who will remain unnamed that will kind of package this with a literally blank template. And yes, it gets eyeballs, but there's some thoughts in there that we could go on about.
Don't feel bad. They're not real people. They're just bots, Brad. So, it's okay to bad.
There has been an increase in bot replies too.
A huge increase. Yeah. But
yeah, cool. Well, let's jump to the outro and bookmarks. I think today, as I went through my bookmarks today, there was so many. I mean, I think the last time we released the podcast was May 8th. Today's June 1st. A bit hard to pick the bookmark of choice, since once I got back, I just kind of did a doom scroll for a few hours to figure out what I wanted and what I missed. what I landed on and the essence of Claude Code is a post from Eric Bues. Hopefully that's how you say his name. He goes off the deep end describing Claude Code, and not only Claude Code, but Claude Code compared to other IDEs. So kind of the same vein that I've been describing. I've used Cursor, I've used Windsurf. Now I'm a maybe power user of Claude Code. Maybe that's too soon to say. I've given it, my 12 hours in the past few days. So I think I'm a little bit more experienced than others, but he walks through pretty much everything about Claude Code, how to be a power user, the pros of Claude Code compared to other solutions like these IDEs that we're all using. And I think it's an excellent read. Like it truly, once I read that tweet, and I'll take a look, it's probably 20 paragraphs. I think it's full of insights. Not every day on Twitter do you get a tweet that really shows you something that you can pull these valuable nuggets from. But I think Eric describes his experience paying for all the tools, comparing them, saying where Claude Code shines, and even highlights a few things where it doesn't shine at. And so if you're on the fence, if you've heard me kind of give my spiel, I only pitch things that I truly like. I like it, almost love it. Eric has a similar opinion, and I read his long post from start to finish, talking about all these things in detail. I think he is really on the money here. So if you're looking for more reading into Claude Code, where it could fit within your workflow, definitely take a look at Eric's post. Just dives deep into everything you would ask, more on the engineering side. So feel free to give that a read.
Cool. Awesome. My bookmark is from Greg Eisenberg, who I think he has a podcast called the Startup Ideas Podcast. And it's a great podcast. I've listened to it since I found his tweets. He does, to our points about the AI hype people on Twitter. His actually puts out a lot of really good, useful content. In fact, I found him because someone else was stealing his content. So the bookmark I have is he has a video introduction to vibe marketing. And it's really cool because especially for an accountant who likes to code, neither of those things are marketing. So it's important to understand how to sell something, and how to market and get in front of eyeballs. I'm sure you can relate with Split My Expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of talks about using tools. I think he goes into N8N specifically, which is like a workflow and an AI enabled workflow tool. It's pretty cool. We'll maybe do a separate video on that. But so he talks about how to use AI and these kind of sequential flows that you can build in N8N to generate marketing on a much more easier and less more frictionless way than kind of the old school of generating content and just manually scheduling things. And again, for someone like me, this is this is great. I had no idea these things exist, so it's pretty cool. I follow him on Twitter. He's got a lot of other good stuff too that I've been enjoying. So definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, marketing is hard. So if you're good at that, please reach out to me. I could use your help.
Yeah, there was some guy, I think it was Ken Griffin, who's I can't remember what he does. And he's super rich. That's all I know. Citadel Investments, I think. But I think he was giving a presentation. He said the number one thing is the ability to sell more than anything else. The ability to sell. I was like, okay, noted. You seem to know a lot about money. Yeah, I was like, you seem to know what you're doing. They're $1 billion condos in Miami. So yeah. Worth knowing. Yeah, so it's good stuff to know.
Cool. Yeah, I could always use some help on marketing. I think a long time ago in the podcast, you had mentioned a marketing book, and I said I would read it, and I have not. And just a reminder for myself.
Building a story brand. Yeah, Donald Miller. Yeah. It's really good. Yeah.
It reminds me of my Duolingo too. I need to get back on that train. So post honeymoon, Brad is going for the mobile app, going for Claude Code, power user, and the era of getting stuff done is what we're entering now.
Yeah, hang on one second. I got one more thing for you. Hang on.
Okay.
Check out. I don't know if you can see it. It's a little notebook for the handwriting. The Hansi, I think it's called.
Yeah. That's difficult. It's quite difficult.
I like it though. It's nice and I haven't done anything in it yet. I just got it the other day. But it's cool writing those characters. But anyways, I digress.
When Duolingo presents you the blank screen, it's a very complicated character. I'm like, is it this? And it shows the line. I'm like, oh, it's that. And then is it this? Yeah. Oh, that's wrong too.
Yeah. It's I knew that. It was just finger slip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
That was a long one. But I think we covered so much that hopefully folks enjoyed it. Again, I think if you're in the comments, please let us know. Really, we're trying to hone in on if you had unlimited software capabilities, aka Claude Code in my mind. What would you build? Where do you think you'd find the value? I'd say if you have the money to try it out, please try it out. Not only does it work on Laravel projects, it can work with existing code, new code. It's, in my opinion, the best way to write code today outside, not using Cursor or Windsurf. So yeah, if you have any personal software interests, please let us know in the comments, like, how much value do you think you'd get out of Claude Code running 24/7? I think it's an interesting question. It's one I've been asking myself very frequently now that I have this new capability to have quote unquote unlimited software written by an agent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agree. Yeah, we're curious to see what people are doing and what kind of value they're getting out of it, because it's exciting times.
It is.
Awesome. All right. Well, good stuff, Brad. And we'll do it all again next time.
Cool. Sounds good. See ya.
See you later. Thank you for listening to the Breaking Brothers podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you may be listening from. Also, be sure to subscribe to our show and YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. Thanks, and take care. All views and opinions by Bradley and Bennett are solely their own and unaffiliated with any external parties.